Hi there. Hey, I'm Jenn Rice, and I'm so excited to be here tonight with my good friend and mentor, Todd
Mm.
Burrier. Todd and we have a lot of great conversations, and so I'm thinking this might just be another one of those, right? And so the whole
Absolutely.
point of doing this for Ascent Wellness is so that we can talk with other people besides, always just, hearing from me in the group, but other people with other expertise, background. Sometimes it'll be someone that maybe just has a special knack in a certain area. Other times it may be a, practicing professional in medicine or in some integrative or functional realm, and then we could surprise ourselves and have some people that know more about food so we can learn new recipes and other cool stuff like that. So we're going to try to do this once a month, and this is our first one, and so I'm just really glad that you guys, if you're watching the replay, I hope you'll find a lot of value with this too. So tonight, talking with Todd, and Todd, he has an amazing background, over 25 years in nutraceuticals and nutritional supplements, really. And so since this webinar is titled Supplements 101, and yes, they taught us quite a bit about supplements in fellowship training, but not so much so that there isn't a lot of more to learn. So I'll kind of chime in some on kind of the background or the reasoning behind supplements. But first, I'd like if Todd can just introduce himself, kind of share a little bit about, how he even got into this field. Thanks for being here.
I'd be happy to, Jen. Thank you so much for having me. And, I shared just a little bit. Obviously, I didn't go to school to be in supplements. It wasn't, well, actually, I went to school to have fun, but, I ended up getting a degree too. But, I ended up getting into nutritional supplements because of need. My family health history is really bad. My father died of cancer when I was 18. I have a brother who died of cancer when he was 42. I'll turn 59 in a couple of months, and I've outlived the average of all the men in my family by about 10 years so far. And that's just the men. The other side's not very good either. And by the time I was in my mid-20s now, I'm clear a lot of this was lifestyle too, even though my genetics weren't super duper. But, in my mid-20s, I had autoimmune. I got strep throat 6 times a year. I had significant upper respiratory issues. And I was sick a lot. I had borderline high blood pressure. I'm extremely allergic to all grass dust and all kinds of stuff. And I lived in Maryland, which is a terrible state for that. Of course, I live in North Carolina right now, which is worse, although I'm not affected now because of what I know what to do, and I haven't had any issues. But really, it was, I spent 12 years totally off the rails, destroying myself as opposed to helping myself. And then when I got married and was starting a family, that's sort of when it was like, you know what, I think I better take care of myself for them. It was more about for them. And, it started with risk management, because when you take care of someone, unfortunately, I've been around a lot of cancer in my life. And when you see that disease up close, like to the point where you're the one that says, oh, my father's dead. You're the one that walks in the room and watch that deterioration. When you're old enough to really mature enough to get what that means, you're like, what can I do to avoid that? And so literally in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, I started doing my own homework. And I'm like, what is the deal? How can you mitigate this risk? There's no such thing as true prevention, but there's definitely risk management. And at the same time I started doing that kind of research, I was studying everything, and, what you would do and what was going on. And I was noticing, oh my gosh, things like heart disease and cancer were exploding then. I mean, what's happened since is mind-boggling. But and it was really easy then to see the correlation that people were being exposed to so much bad stuff from a toxicity perspective and environment perspective, and the body wasn't getting enough from the food supply to combat it. It was common sense once I looked at it. And so I started supplementing from a risk management perspective, not expecting to notice anything, which I didn't much in the first 6 or 7 years. I did have a reduction in how frequently I got strep throat. That went down. The reason I got strep throat so much is I had scarlet fever when I was 18. Like, who gets scarlet fever? You know, it's like one of those things. Nobody gets scarlet fever. So that reduced to like a couple times a year. And then in 1996, I had a very good friend who had struggled mightily with lupus for several years. And I had watched his decline, like to the point where he could not button his shirts or tie his shoes. And he was 35 and he couldn't even use his hands. They were like so inflamed. And all of a sudden one day I walked in his house and he looked totally normal. And like, what happened to you? And he pulled out a bottle of supplements. It was a very potent antioxidant that I'd heard of and I was interested in because, you know, I understood to the degree you could increase antioxidants, you could lower risk. And that changed my mentality from risk management to optimizing health. And so then I poured myself into that side of the equation and you know, I investigated that manufacturer and saw that they were pharmaceutical grade manufacturers. The way they made products was very unique and what they were doing was very unique, but nothing fancy, right? It wasn't about magic pills. It was about fundamentals. And my health went, I mean, I'll be 59 in a few months. I'm much healthier right now than I was when I was 29. You know, I don't take meds. I have tons of energy. I have no health issues at all that I deal with. You know, I'm still tested allergic and certainly have beat my body to, you know what, over the years. But that's kind of what drove me. I didn't get into supplements. Now, I have an economics degree and an MBA, and I get the industry of supplements. It's a smart thing to do from a business perspective, you know, in a big picture, because it's a growing dynamic market that's not going to shrink. But I didn't get into supplements. And I didn't market supplements because it was an industry to be in. I couldn't help it because they changed my life. And I mean, I could tell you stories just in my family that would make your hair curl and then uncurl again as a result of what's the positive things that have happened to people dear to me that were life and death from getting the right things in their body. So I know what they can do. And in my entire peer group, essentially it does the same thing, has the same kind of life. So it's pretty evident. So that's why I'm passionate about it.
I know. I love it though, because, okay, I'm going to do my confession on supplements. Like, I literally didn't even take a multivitamin until 2.5 years ago. I was a firm believer in, there's a pill for every ill. I was conventionally medically trained. I was like, well, if anything breaks, there's going to be a nice pharmaceutical to fix it. Obviously, they know how to, you know, I was trained in a kind of reactive field. And that was how I was living my life for a long time. And I wasn't even really open to knowing any other way until I was. And you don't really know until you have to sometimes figure out other things. And so I think this conversation about supplements is it's a newer one for me, because I just started about 2.5 years ago, just using any. In fact, I remember leaving the functional medicine office and she wanted me to start like 12 things. And I looked at her and I said, I haven't even taken a multivitamin and I'm like 45 years old. Like, I don't think I'm going to start this like anytime soon, you know, with 12 things. So she's like, okay, well, and I started with some of the basics, like, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more in detail, but like, you know, vitamin D, magnesium, just these things I was completely nutritionally deficient. I remember I started your multivitamin powder and I was like, I talked to you in a couple days and I was like, is it weird for people to feel really hyper on this? You're like, really know. I don't think, I mean, you must be really nutrient deficient. I was like, I think I might be, do you remember that? And I was like, yeah. So at any rate, just to go over real quickly, oxidative stress in general, and this is what we want to talk about, is there's something called reactive oxygen species and oxidative stress. And we're not going to get like super deep in this, but I know there's people watching this that are in medicine, some that aren't, and so I just kind of want to cover this a little bit because I learned none of this in PA school, but I think it's really helpful to understand what's really going on, with us and with all this chronic disease coming up, autoimmune diseases, like why does every other person have diabetes? There are multiple things involved, but one thing in particular is that when there's an imbalance between the production of reactive oxygen species, which are like the things coming in from the outside that we don't really want a lot of, and our body's own antioxidant defense mechanisms. So with that, it's saying that we don't have enough innate antioxidants oftentimes to ward off all of the things coming in from the outside, in the food, from the inside, all sorts of things. And I want to use hypertension as an example because I was reading about this earlier today and talking about this one physician that wrote about this. He's a well-known, cardiologist, got into functional medicine, started talking about the mechanisms of reactive oxygen species, and in that inducing hypertension. And what's happening with that is that there's actually an imbalance of vasodilators, like think nitric oxide, vasoconstrictors, which are like the angiotensin, and then the reactive oxygen species just contribute to this like perpetuation, irritation. It's just like this big circle that starts. So when people say, oh, I have high blood pressure, I just got it. Well, it didn't really just come. Yes, there are genetic factors, potentially, and there are environmental things, but and what he believes too, is that it's really coming from this, especially essential hypertension, coming from this lack of antioxidants that are fighting off the rest. So, and I'm sure you could probably run with that, like in all different directions.
I could give you a really cool example because you've heard me mention Dwight McKee before, Dr. Dwight McKee. He's the author of After Cancer Cares. He's arguably one of the greatest oncologists in history and the founder of integrative oncology along with Andrew Ware. But he's a very good friend of mine. And Dwight describes what happens with the free radicals, is what you're essentially talking about, when you can't quench it antioxidant-wise. It's like an electrical current going through your body because the reactions are so fast, with each molecule ripping away another molecule from the body, from the cell, to quench itself since there's not enough antioxidant. And that is essentially how, if you imagine, it's like lightning going on in your body the whole time. And that is just damage. The whole thing is damage. And to the degree, right, like the old analogy of if you cut an apple in half and you lay it on a counter, it'll turn brown, right? You put lemon juice on it and it doesn't turn brown. You make Waldorf salad, right? That's because of the antioxidants quenching the oxidative stress on top of that apple, to make it simple, right? That's what happens in your body when you can get enough. But people aren't getting it because they're getting bombed, right? Like absolutely blasted environmentally.
Exactly. And so one thing I want to, before supplements are one part of this, and they can be, an important thing daily, but also food choices. We hammer that out like over and over and over again in the group too, because one thing I was reading today, he was talking about that humans are genetically 99.9% like hunter-gatherer species, and we have, with the industrial agricultural revolution, we're just getting like all of this type of food that just we were never really necessarily like prepared for, and that's partly like increased saturated fats, increased B6s, low omega-3s to B6 ratio, like all of these kind of things when you start reading about it. And so one of the main things that, we talk about is you got to start with food. And whether that's the DASH diet or it's just a plant-based diet, or maybe you're following a specific doctor recommended program for, whatever it might be. But I was just going to run through Todd, his list. This cardiologist who talked about just the supplements that he would recommend to a patient that he saw that was worried about hypertension, trying to work with hypertension. The reason I'm bringing up cardiac is because it's the #1 cause of death, often overlooked, often, I just saw a friend's post of he was, rest in peace post for a friend of his that had a massive heart attack out of nowhere. She was like in her 50s. And, we're not trying to like doomsday it, but it's like, this is the #1 killer. So like we can start working against this reactive oxygen species. That's going to be done with food. It's going to be done with exercise. It's going to be done with stress relief, lifestyle modifications, putting things in balance. And yes, adding certain supplementations can be crucial to kind of keep that internal balance. So he talks about potassium, magnesium, zinc, protein sources either from whey or soy, cold water fish, fats like omega-3, reducing and eliminating. So not only what you're bringing in, but what must you get out, like refined sugars, like however you can make that happen. Like every refined sugar you eliminate is a thumbs up, right? Like, and it won't be perfect all the time, but the more you can do it, the better. Vitamin C, B6, CoQ10, alpha lipoic acid, taurine, L-arginine, vitamin D, of course, is in there, fiber's in there. But it's kind of just like a run through. I know we wanted to provide like a run through short list, and you may already be taking certain things, or maybe a certain combination of things. And if you're wanting kind of more of a dosing on what you should have daily, I mean, that's definitely something that you can reach out to Todd or me, and we can kind of talk a little bit more about that. So would you agree with his short list?
Well, I mean, everything.
I mean, a lot more.
Right? I mean, there isn't anything he said that I don't use. Let's put it that way. I mean, I use other stuff too, and I get a lot of that in more of a condensed fashion. Because if you look at nutrients, right, they're not like drugs. You don't take them singularly. That's not the way the body takes them. That's not how nature provides them. That's not how they're used. Like vitamin C alone is involved in 15,000 different metabolic functions, right? It's not just you take vitamin C for this, right? People think calcium is for strong bones. No, that's where you keep it. That's not what your body uses it for. Your body uses it to make your heart beat. It uses it to burn fat. It uses it to have cellular energy. It uses it for all these other things, blood clotting, right? So, and this is part of, it's no information, right? Unless you go seek it. Nobody's getting educated on that. But, the other part of that equation, which you were talking about, is, yes, try to get away from bad food as much as possible, but even good food has bad stuff in it. That's the unfortunate part, right? There's 100,000 chemicals in the environment. The problem with chemicals in the environment is chemists aren't toxicologists. They have no idea what happens when the chemical gets in your body and hangs out and meets another chemical. And that's just the chemicals in the environment. That has nothing to do with the chemicals in the food supply, which there are 3,000 of them. And it doesn't matter if you eat organic. That just means there's a couple different chemicals not used in that particular growing. But that doesn't mean anything based on the field next to the one that your stuff is growing in, and the soil that is already, the microbiome is compromised. So you have, unfortunately, even if you're smart about your food choices, there isn't a lot of nutrients in today's food. Even the good foods are very deplete. And then, of course, processed food is, it's calorically dense and nutritionally void. Right, that's essentially what processed food is, and it's everywhere. It's industrialized food, right? not only are we not designed to get food that way, we're not designed to eat chemicals. Right? We're not designed for that. Right? So that's the issue, right? The issue is, yeah, you can put all the stuff in there, not enough sleep and not enough exercise. But the biggest issue is too much negativity hitting the body and not enough good stuff to fight it off. It's actually that simple. You really like boil it down, and that's what supplements do.
Yeah, and I do want to give there are a few supplements that I use that are with your with the company that you're with that are amazing, and actually I think that they're worth talking about, especially proanthanols. I just want to give a big shout out for that specific option. And you're probably thinking, what? If you don't know about it, you're probably like, oh yeah, whatever. I don't know, whatever. There's probably another thing. I was like, I'll order this. It's antioxidants. I hear about antioxidants. I understand antioxidants because it's in a lot of skincare. A lot of skincare background is all the chemistry they're doing with skin is like, how do we get enough antioxidants in the skin? And so I was like, okay, well, it would make sense that I would be trying to eat additional or have a supplement that was additional antioxidants, but I just couldn't possibly have all of I couldn't get that in food. Mm-hmm. So I have found that I think I've taken that 2 years and about 2 years among some other things, but I do think if you, Todd is also here you can follow up with him. He's in the group. You can always like tag him if you have questions. He can share a little bit more at the end here about, how to get in touch with him, also. But we want to move on to autoimmune because we definitely promised a little bit of an autoimmune focus. And for someone that may not even really know, like, what is an autoimmune condition? It's basically when the body attacks its own immune system. And examples of these are like, lupus, like Todd mentioned earlier, but like Hashimoto's thyroiditis. That was the video that Vanessa, if you missed the video Vanessa did in the group on her fixing her Hashimoto's thyroiditis with elimination of certain foods, where they had asked her to irradiate her thyroid, and she ended up fixing her autoimmune condition herself by changing, what she was basically, not that that always will happen, but so exciting for her to have not had to go through that. Rheumatoid arthritis is another big one. Diabetes, though, guys, diabetes is an autoimmune condition. I know we kind of throw, oh, she's diabetic, he's diabetic, they're diabetic, oh, now she's diabetic. And it seems so common, but it's an autoimmune condition, and it's a reversible one to an extent. You want to get there earlier than later, that's for sure. Scleroderma, Addison's disease. I won't name all of them, but I also want to mention a few skin ones because those are ones that I deal with often. Vitiligo, psoriasis, eczema, all of these in that same family. And supplementation has become something I mention even in my dermatology clinic now when it comes to those skin conditions, because many people don't know if they're vitamin D deficient. They've never even checked. And I've had patients come back to me and say, I'm 75% better. I eliminated dairy and gluten and started taking vitamins. It's like, seriously? And meanwhile, we were writing like all this $5,000 medicine a month. So Johns Hopkins says that 23.5 million Americans have an autoimmune condition. I mean, that's kind of what the number, I'm sure, could be higher. But 80% of those are female. 80% of the autoimmunes are female. And you might say, like, well, why? Why is that? I mean, I feel like
it's men. Men are the problem.
It's Todd's fault. So there you go. No, but they're thinking one theory is that we have high levels of hormones, especially during childbearing years, and that can tend to be the time period where most of this autoimmune can come forward. But there's genetic, environmental But I thought that I knew that the autoimmune numbers were high for women, but it was hard to read the 80% today. It was kind of like preparing for this, and I wanted to get some current numbers, and I was like, ooh. So then what that means is we have to do, as women, we need to be really kind of shoring up in every way we can. And that can be with certain foods for sure. We know that nightshade foods, which are bell peppers, hot peppers, tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, chilies, those can be things that sometimes can worsen autoimmune conditions for people. It's not a hard, fast rule, but it's something you can look into. Chocolate, sorry, I know, but chocolate, especially milk chocolate, grains like even rice, oats, corn, and even quinoa, I was reading. You just have to kind of see what works for you and what doesn't. So, but let's, I'll have Todd kind of run us through, for autoimmune, you know, what can be some of the best supplements that one can look into and consider doing.
Yeah, so, you know, I actually enjoy talking about autoimmune because it's one of the most fulfilling areas to help somebody with, because most women that are dealing with autoimmune, they have been told by their doctor it's in their head, that there's nothing they can do, there's nothing wrong with them. Meanwhile, they're in pain, the quality of life is greatly diminished. And I can't count the number of times I've gotten a phone call where someone said, oh my gosh, I was gardening today. I'm so excited because I haven't been able to do that for 3 years. Or I walked up the stairs to get something and I realized, oh my gosh, I haven't gone up the steps in the last year because it was too painful. I mean, that's all the time. And, you know, the first most important thing in all of this conversation is there are a lot of people in the marketplace selling magic pills, magic products, right? And not saying that there isn't value in a lot of those so-called magic pills and juices, etc., because those nutrients have value. But nothing is more important than foundational nutrition. They're just like pharmaceutical Band-Aids if they actually work. They're not doing anything to build your body back up. And so it's really actually pretty simple for autoimmune. First, it's nourish and cleanse with foundational products. So for us, it would be like the powder you mentioned, BioBasics, which is fruits and vegetables, vitamins and minerals, fiber, probiotics, antioxidants, special greens, all in a powder. And then the omega-3s and the vitamin D together, right? Which is a product called Omni Gold. An interesting little nugget is, you know, fibromyalgia is one of those really commonly heard about autoimmunes. If you look at a map that shows the frequency of fibromyalgia in the world, you will see there's virtually none at the equator. The whole wrap around the world at the equator has no fibromyalgia because of vitamin D. So, I mean, vitamin D deficiency is another significant contributor to autoimmune, not just because it's so important for the immune system, but also without adequate vitamin D, you don't absorb calcium, which messes up your calcium-magnesium balance, which messes up your B vitamins, which messes up your hormones, which messes up everything, right? So it's one little thing, right? So those two things as a foundation, and then the antioxidant that you mentioned, the proanthanols one, because it is a network as an antioxidant, and it does such an incredible job of helping the body fight the oxidative stress, which translates as inflammation in that circumstance. And then I add MSM to that, which is another nutritional sulfur that the body needs a lot of it, and it's less and less in the food supply because it comes from extremely fresh fruits and vegetables. Like the minute you pick an apple from a tree, it begins to evaporate. By the time it gets to your table, there's virtually no MSM in it. And that combination, 3 weeks. I'm not saying 3 weeks, it's not about curing. It's about what I've seen consistently is within 3 weeks, someone feels noticeably different, like really fun. Now I've seen it happen a little quicker, but I would never tell someone that could happen. Like, overcoming something you've had for a while probably should take a while. It's
right.
Fast, right? but if you're eating, if people will change their diets and get the right nutrients, it's pretty cool what can happen. And so, as I said, that's one of the most gratifying areas, because you just see lives really change. That's really cool. It's a really cool thing.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, I know that you could go, I mean, we could go like hours with this, but I hope that everybody who hears this live or with the replay, if you have certain questions, and maybe if you're not able to say them live, or maybe you're not in a place to do that, or just haven't reflected enough to even have the questions, you can always post them in the group, and we can open up more of a dialogue with it. We'll also make sure that we're trying to answer as precisely as we can. And then how would people get a hold of you, Todd? What would you prefer? Just to have conversations from the group, or?
I know some people don't like to do that because they're uncomfortable having that publicly. I'm flexible. You can email me or call me. My email is tburrier@gmail. You can post that in the group, Jen. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay, good. I love the email idea. That's great.
Yeah, and then we can connect and talk by phone. I prefer to talk to somebody, because then I can really get to the root of what they're struggling with and help them. And just as a side, with the way our manufacturer works, you buy any products from me, you buy them direct from the manufacturer at my cost. That's how it works. It's a very unique manufacturer. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, but I'm happy to help and share any of my experience. And, if I can't help, I'll direct you to wherever I think someone can help.
Yeah, we so appreciate it. Now, before we jump off, any thoughts in particular about coronavirus and prepping? Are you just taking your regular stuff? Are you boosting more? I mean, I know I did take a little extra. I'm kind of like, I was telling Todd the other day, I'm so bad about supplements. Like, I'm always like, I don't know, it says to take 2 on the bottle, but I should only probably take 1. Or if it says 4 tablets, I'm like, probably 1 is good. I don't know how I'll react to it. He's like, I think it says that for a reason. So anyhow, I am like, okay, I think I can take 2, because now I'm fighting against these forces out there unknown. So other than washing hands, which I'm sure people are doing, and staying home if they're sick and all of that, are you increasing antioxidants?
Well, I actually there are 2 things that I generally use through the year. Like if I'm gonna have a speaking engagement or something like that, I'm the one who's speaking. I can't get sick. I have to be able to show up, right? So and then in any times of potential compromised immunity, maybe I burn the candle a little bit. Or in the winter season, I use 2 specific supplements, which I'm definitely on right now and will stay on all the way. Well, first of all, I'm doing multiple speaking engagements a month right now anyway, so I would be, but given the virus, we're all going to get exposed. Right now, it doesn't mean we're going to feel it or notice it or have it, but we're going to get exposed. So I take a product called DNA Immune, which is literally protects the body at the cellular level. And I also take Cat's Claw, which is a very powerful antiviral immune booster that comes out of the South American rainforest. And so those 2 things are in my daily regimen right now. And I actually did a live video on my profile about that I can't remember what I called it. And I just talked about my personal recipe, which I don't normally do, but I did.
And if people want to follow you, you're at on Facebook. You're at what's your Facebook page?
My fan page is Todd Burrier.page, or I don't know.
Just look at Todd Burrier and see what happens. I don't think there'll be anybody else out there. But we so appreciate your time tonight, and thank you for being like our first ever guest, and
it was an honor.
And being available to people to help them if they would like to have help in this. So it's always options. And but otherwise, I think all of us could definitely use a lot more oxidative stress protection, I think, is a take-home message on this. But you were right, like autoimmune, it would be hard for us to cover this in a short webinar. I think, though, having someone reach out to you by email with specific questions is probably the best way to do that. So we'll post that in this link of this too.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer something in the group too, as I can. So, you know,
Yeah.
that's okay. It's just that, you know, I'll do whatever somebody needs to help. That's okay with me.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up.
All right. Thanks for having me, Jen.
Yeah. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye-bye.